Aha! This is Labort, and it is so nice to have you here. These are the paints you need. This week the guys on Patreon voted for the Reaper. Big guy with tentacles that screams death. Now, let's get to it. As you can see, I'm primed the mini black. We start painting the tentacles with ashen grey. Papa Labort's goal was to make the dark purplish vibe for them. I use a dry brush to apply the paint fast, and it's handy to use for the suction cups because dry brushes can take a beating while applying paint between those bumps. If you have an airbrush, use that, but keep in mind that the surface of the tentacles are filled with these tiny holes and we want to leave those black if we can. Now to get that purple hue going, I applied some warp thin grey to the bottom of the tentacles. For some reason I decided to use a regular brush for this, so I checked if I have any mental disability. Turns out Papa Labort is okay, so I switched back to the dry brush. Quick note, I'm using a hobby dry brush, but I'm not dry brushing. I just apply paint this way because it's a bit faster. I painted all the suction cups except the ones that are really close to the base. Turns out the test Papa Labort did was a fake one because I switched back to the regular brush again and watching this in retrospect. You can definitely do this using a dry brush, just more efficiently. Basically, I highlighted the top part of the suction cups with the mix of warp-finned and administratum grey. I also did the sides of the suction cups that are closer to the torso, and later Papa Labort came to his senses and switched back to the dry brush. Lastly, I dry brushed some administratum grey as an edge highlight, and with that the suction cups are done. Okay, moving on to the surface of those lovely tentacles. If you saw some octopus live or in a nature documentary or just a big fan of animated Japanese film culture, then you know that the top surface of the tentacles are usually darker than the bottom parts. So with that in mind, I mixed some warp-finned grey and ashen grey and applied it with a dry brush, because Papa Labort is smart. Now with pure warp-finned grey we increase the contrast of our slippery slopes by gradually decreasing the highlight areas. Again, a dry brush can help you in a big way. You can see that I only highlight the upper portion of the tentacles. I do this to reinforce our focal point for the torso. Mix some administratum grey to the warp-finned grey and continue the process. You can use stippling with a dry brush to add some more rigid texture to the tentacles. It will complement the punctured surface. Keep in mind that the brush I'm using is wet all the time like Granny's armpit, so have some moisture between those bristles. To increase the purple hue, I glaze some purple ink to the midtones. Don't go over the highlights with this or I slap on your tiny hand. This will also increase the depth of our shadows. To mute the purple a bit back, I also glaze some black to the shadow parts. This will give us the dark tentacle look Papa Labort was aiming for. You can use diluted contrast paint for that too, like Black Templar, but a regular black paint will work just as fine. With administratum grey, increase the highlights with some stippling. This will help with the shininess of the tentacle. Have a nice tip for your brush and a base layer consistency. Do some edge highlight for the bottom part of the holes on the tentacles. Now we glaze over the administratum grey to smooth out the surface and make those tentacles a bit more shiny. Lastly, we will do a light dry brushing with the white grey all over the highlight areas and suction cups, and it will serve us as an edge highlight for the tentacles as well. It will increase the definition and the tentacles are good as done. Okay guys, now it's time for the armor. This will take some time, but Papa Labors know that you are eager to do it, so let's do it. We start with ashen gray. Cover every part and only leave some black between the armor panels, so we don't have to blackline between them. Also leave the extreme shadows black, like under his arms and on his back. Now glaze over the armor with some thin damp paint and try not to hit the crevices or I'll slap on your tiny hand. Now black lining time! Actually Papa Labors blacklined some between the upcoming steps as well, so do it as you please because it will increase the definition of the armor greatly. Remember, base layer consistency and the pointed tip is the key to have a nice thin line. Cover all the scratches on the armor and the gaps between the panels. If you need to, of course. The first highlight will be downstone. Actually the process and the colors are kinda the same as we did in the Andra video, but this is where it gets interesting. Same colors but different goal. Andra has a dark armor, but the Reaper's is much more brighter. So we need to have bigger highlight areas, so the highlight parts basically becomes our mid-tone. With that in mind, cover 80% of the ashen gray parts with downstone. Here is the result of how I place the highlights. On the shield and on the hanging armor pieces, I use some angled lights to honor the great artwork of the game. Papa Labors is a bit itchy today, but I think you can guess why it is. It was like 2 minutes since we glazed. Remember guys, start the brush stroke in the dark area and stop it at the bright area. Same motion every time. Now Administratum Gray time. Guys, I actually ran out of Administratum Gray, I use it so much, I need a refill. Anyway, gradually decrease the highlight areas and use base layer consistency. I started to do some edge highlights with this color. It won't be our final edge highlight, but I like to see if I'm going in the right direction, and edge highlighting helps me to see that. The reason for that is, edge highlight helps the NMM come to life in an instant. I also did the edges that are facing down with this color. Glazing time! Smooth like Granny's butt cheek, with a couple of layers of glazing. The more you do it, the smoother it gets. And as always, I leave this up to you how smooth you want it, but I did like 2 or 3 coats. Our final highlight color is white gray. Use stippling, creating tiny dots to add some texture to our armor, and it will help us greatly with blending. As you see, the armor starts to get a proper shine, and the layers are smooth. Don't forget about the rivets and spikes either. I'm using this off-white color, because it's cold. As you can see, I didn't use the single warm color to this mini yet. That's because this mini represents death, so it makes sense for me to make it cold and dark. Warm saturated colors would be strange, in my opinion. Now glaze over the white gray like we did in the previous steps. Then we bust out our whitest white and edge highlight every edge you can find on that mini, especially the spikes on the armor. Use base layer consistency and the side of your brush. If you see Papa Labors using the tip of the brush, that's because I can't angle the brush and the mini in a way that it would be good for the camera and for your beautiful shiny eyes, so use the side of your brush because it's much easier that way. With that, RNMM done, and you may notice that the side of my Reaper broke, but Mrs. Labors fixed it by sticking a heated up needle into the pole and covered it with some green stuff, so we can go on to the next part. For the leather straps and belts, I used dried bark. Then I add some Bugman's glue to the dried bark and replace some highlights along the NMM highlights with base layer consistency and with some stapling. Lastly, I used pure Bugman's glue and did some edge highlight to increase the contrast. Now it's time for the caul, or veil if you like. We painted black, but black is a bit tricky, because if you want to paint something realistically black, that's usually not really black. Just look at some common examples. Like most of the things black, we read as how much and what color of light it reflects. In this case, we presume it is not so much. So we leave 40% of the caul black and apply ashing gray to the rest of the surface. Now we highlight it with downstone, but with the same method, we cover only the half of the ashing gray surface. Paint all the edges to increase the definition. You may have realized I use all the same grays throughout the whole mini, because this way our paint job will be consistent and all the different parts feels like they belong in the same environment. Smooth out the layers with some glazing. You don't need much of it because the caul is quite rough, and the more rough the texture, the less glazing you need to make it blend in. I apply the final highlight of the Administratum Grey with a heavy glaze consistency. Take your time placing this highlight. If you feel like your caul is getting too bright and grey, glaze some black over it to mute it down, but you'll get a slap on your tiny hand. If you did it right, it will read as black and look silky smooth like Granny's butt cheek. Don't forget about the holes on the caul and edge highlight the bottom part of them to increase the definition. For the quite biblical tone wreath, I used Bugman's glue. I couldn't really figure out what those bumps supposed to be, but turns out they are small flowers. Yeah, those well, they are not the best sculpted flowers. Anyway, I highlighted them using a mix of Bugman's glue and white gray, and for the final highlight I used white gray, but really no clue how to make them look like flowers. I guess you could green stuff some tiny flowers if you want, but that's a bit too much work for me. We are not painting this for a competition, so I'm fine with these bumps. For the side of the Reaper, I did the exact same process as for the armor, so if you did the armor right, you will have no problem with the side. All the colors are the same: ashing gray, downstone, administratum gray, white gray, and some pure white for the edge highlight. This side is very nicely sculpted, so you have a great time painting it. Remember, the blades have some wide flat surfaces, so to have a smooth finish you need to glaze it a bit more, but believe me, it's worth it. Also, if you want Papa Labors to make more Massive Darkness 2 videos, leave a comment and like the video. For the eyes, I used white undercoat and painted phalanx yellow over it. And yeah, this mini would be better without eyes in my opinion, because those small dot eyes make it look like it's a Java on steroids. Lastly, I finished the ornaments on the side staff part and the belt buckles on the armor. It's really the same process as all the element part we did before. Papa Labort is pretty pleased with this one, and I hope you are as well. Gold, dark colors, almost monochromatic, but I think it works well representing the Reaper. So guys, thank you for joining me on this little painting adventure. Huge thanks to my Patreons who support these kind of videos, with a special shout out to Jonathan Rhodes. If you want to vote on the next mini that Papa Labort should make a video about and have early access to these videos, or maybe you just want to support the work of Papa Labort, then you can do it on Patreon now. I hope the rest of your day will be as smooth as a granny's